What guns will actually kill on Black Ops 1 zombies after or around round 50? Well, the important detail to keep in mind here is that a zombie's health on round 50 is 47,295. So a weapon will have to beat that to kill a single zombie on this round. Also, quick disclaimer that we are actually on round 51 for most of the gameplay in this video, but it's not that much of a difference in terms of health, so it should be fine. And after we've been through all the guns, I'm going to go through the top 5 best guns to use on high rounds that aren't wonder weapons. Starting off with the M1911 fan favorite gun, the base version of it is going to do 20 damage, and the ammo capacity is 8 in the magazine and 80 in reserve. Now this gun's very basic, it's not going to do much in the higher rounds, but when you pack punch it to the Mustang and Sally, that's when things get a little bit more spicy. When pack punching it to the Mustang and Sally, the damage is going to increase by a ton, with maximum damage being able to do 1200 damage. These are also dual wield and do splash damage as well. In terms of ammo, you're going to get 6 in each pistol, and then in reserve, you're going to be getting 50. Now, straight at the bat, this gun is one of the best ones to have on high rounds in terms of actually killing stuff. It's actually going to do some damage, and you're actually going to get some kills with it, unlike some of the other weapons in this video. Moving on to the CZ75, this gun is going to do roughly 150 damage when it's not pack-a-punch. In terms of ammo, you got 50 in the magazine, and then you got 130 in reserve. Now, again, another basic pistol, and when you pack-a-punch it, it doesn't do that much better. It goes up to 300 damage, which is, yeah, double, and the head multiplier is 3.5. You get an ammo increase in the magazine to 20, and then in reserve you have 240, and to be honest, this gun ain't going to do that much in the higher rounds. It's pretty bad. But it is a pistol, so what do you really expect? And it can also get it in a dual-wield version of it, and it is a little better because there's 2 of them. The 2 only redeeming factors to this gun is 1, it's full auto when it's pack-a-punched, and the pack-a-punch name, the Calamity, is pretty cool. Moving on to the Python, this gun is actually going to be quite strong on the lower rounds with 1000 damage, and with a multiplier of 1.5 unpack-a-punched. It's going to get some kills on the earlier rounds, with 6 in the magazine and 84 in reserve, but when you pack-a-punch it, nothing really happens. The damage will still be 1000, with the head multiplier going up to 3, so you could do a bit more damage on the higher rounds, a bit more ammo with 12 in the magazine and 96 in reserve. It's a shame because the gun actually doesn't improve all that much. And even in a scenario where you get headshots with this thing all on one zombie, that's only going to total up to 32,400 damage, and you're just not going to reach enough damage to actually kill a zombie with it. Moving on to some of the better guns in this game, the rifles. First of all, we'll start off with the AUG, which in terms of damage can do a maximum of 140, and then the head multiplier is 4 on it as well, so you could rack that up a wee bit. In terms of ammo, it has 30 in the magazine and 270 in reserve, and when you pack punch it to the AUG 50 M3, it's going to go up to 200 damage with a head multiplier of 5. It's still unfortunately not going to do enough. If you use the AUG and pack-a-punch and then pack-a-punch it and then, kill the same zombies and such with it, you might be able to get a few kills, but it'll only be a few. The same scenario kind of happens with the Commando, which has a maximum damage of 150 with a head multiplier of 4, and with ammo you're looking at 30 in the magazine and 270 in reserve. When you pack-a-punch it to the Predator, it goes up to 210, which is more powerful than the AUG. And in terms of ammo, you're getting 40 in the magazine compared to the 30 that you were with a Commando, and then in reserve you're getting 360. Again, this gun ain't gonna kill that much in the higher rounds. You'll maybe get 1 or 2 if you use the Commando, then the Predator to finish off the Horde. It's still gonna have somewhat of a struggling time killing foe. Moving on to the FAMAS, that has a maximum damage of 100 with a head multiplier of 4, and then 30 in the magazine, and then 150 in reserve. It's going to be fine on the lower rounds like all the other weapons, but on the higher rounds it ain't going to do much. When you pack-a-punch it to the G16 though, it does a little better. The damage goes up to 150, the head multiplier turns to 5, with 45 in the magazine, and then 225 in reserve. This gun is the least likely one out of the rifles, I would say, to actually get a kill, just because the damage is quite low. And this would be fine if it had ammo to compensate for that, but it really doesn't. So you might get a few kills if you use the strat again, where you use the unimpacked and then pack-a-punch it version, but it's still going to seriously struggle. The one gun that is actually kind of decent on the higher rounds is the FAL. Even though it gets memed on quite a lot, it actually is more powerful than some of the other guns. The FAL as a base weapon is a semi-automatic. It does 160 damage maximum with a head multiplier of 4, When you're looking at the magazine, you're looking at 20 in there, and then 180 in reserve. But when you pack punch it to the epic win, you're going to be getting a maximum damage of 240, with a head multiplier of 5, the gun turns into a free round burst, which is kind of cool, the ammo mag capacity will go up to 30, and then in reserve you're getting 360, so quite a big buff from the FAL. Now it's going to get a few kills in the higher rounds, again if you use the FAL and then the epic win in combination, but it most likely won't take out a whole horde. Then moving on to the G11 with 100 damage, and then a multiplier of 4 for headshots. This gun's also a free round burst, and with the magazine you're getting 48 in there and then 144 in reserve. So there's quite a lot in the magazine, and when you pack a punch it, the damage doesn't go up that much, it goes up to 150, the head multiplier goes up to 5, the magazine stays the same, but the ammo has quite a significant increase with it going to 288. Again, you'll get a few kills, maybe 1 or 2, but it's not going to do that much. The Galil, on the other hand, will, with the base version of it having 150 damage, alongside with it having a multiplier of 4 for headshots, the magazine having 35 in it, and then the reserve having 315. It's when you pack punch this thing though, it becomes an absolute monster, with its damage going to 220, the head multiplier going to 5, getting that 30 rounds in the magazine still, but 490 in reserve. It's actually mental how much of a step up the Galil is compared to all the other weapons. This thing just has so much ammo, and it damages okay as well. This is definitely going to at least get you a few kills, and it's probably the best assault rifle in terms of overall damage output anyway. Then moving on to the God Gun, the M14, with the damage of 105, a head multiplier of 3, alongside 8 in the magazine and a 96 in reserve. And then when you pack a punch it, the damage will go up to 200. The head multiplier will be 6, and with 16 in the magazine and 192 in reserve, it has okay-ish ammo. This thing isn't going to kill anything on the higher rounds though. If you're ever so lucky, maybe one, but in terms of practicality use, it's just that there's no point, don't use it. There's so many other guns, there's better wall guns to use, just avoid this thing. The best wall gun you could use is probably going to be the M16, which has 100 damage, a head multiplier of 4, 30 in the magazine and 120 in reserve. But when you pack punch it to the Skull Crusher, you're going to get that damage up to 150, a head multiplier of 5, 30 still in the magazine, but then 270 in reserve, so quite a big increase in ammo. To be honest, this thing by itself ain't going to do that much on the higher rounds, but you can buy ammo for it, so you will get kills slowly. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but if you want something to take along with the long haul, I would say the M16 is probably your go-to. Now going with the SMGs, we have the AK-74U. Now this thing is going to do 120 damage. It has a head multiplier of 4, 20 in the magazine, and 160 in reserve. So it's going to do mid-ish rounds okay, but when you start getting into the later 20s, it's going to fall off quite heavily. But when you pack punch it, the damage goes up a good amount. It's 190, a head multiplier of 5, with 40 in the magazine, and then 280 in reserve. Now, the best thing this gun has for it is the fact that it's a wall buy. It will probably struggle to get kills in the higher round, I'm not gonna lie. But just like most of the weapons on this list, the fact that they're wall buys means that you can get a few kills with them, since you have a constant supply of ammo that you can go and buy. The MP5K is quite similar in that respect, where it has alright damage, it's quite low, but it's 100 with a head multiplier of 4, with 30 in the magazine and 120 in reserve. When you pack a punch it, you're going to get 140 damage, a 5 headshot multiplier, 40 in the magazine, and then 200 in reserve. Not gonna lie, this thing also isn't that great. The fact that it's a wall weapon kind of helps it a wee bit, but in the long run I would just avoid using this. If you're going to get a wall weapon, you'd get something like the M16 or the absolute GOAT, the MP40. Now the MP40 will do 100 damage, it has 32 in reserve, it has a 4 headshot multiplier, and the magazine has 192 in it. When you pack a punch it to the afterburner, the damage will double to 200, the head multiplier will become 5, the magazine size will go up to 64, and then in reserve you still have 192. Now, this is one of the strongest SMGs. But even with that, on round 50, you're still going to be hard pressed to actually get a kill with this thing. It's not bad as an overall weapon, and if you went to the higher rounds, you could use this and, you know, you progress through rounds slowly, but surely since it's a wall weapon. But in that case, like, you'd just rather get something that would actually kill. I think for weapons on the wall in general, it's actually alright if they're a little bit weaker, just because that's what you want in a wall weapon. You want something that's going to get you points early on, so you can hit the mystery box and get the guns that do more damage. The MPL, this thing's just kind of mid overall. So the damage is going to be 100, the headshot multiplier is going to be 4, there's 24 in the magazine, and then there is 120 in reserve. When you pack punch it, the damage goes up by 40, not that much, 140. The headshot multiplier is 5, with 40 in the magazine, and then there's 200 in reserve. This thing is just don't get it. It's not going to do anything on the higher rounds. The only thing that's decent about it is the mobility, but a lot of the SMGs have good mobility, so why would you bother? Moving on to the PM63, this thing has 100 damage, a headshot multiplier of 4, the magazine being 20, and then in reserve you have 100. It's okay on the lower rounds. When you pack a punch it, it turns into Tokyo and Rose. And what's cool about this is it's a dual wield weapon, so you're getting 140 damage on this bad boy. There's a 5 headshot multiplier. In your mags, you're getting 25 per pistol, and then reserve, you're getting 225. This thing's actual damage input is actually not that bad since it's dual wield. The issue is it doesn't have enough ammo to compensate for it, so it's not going to do a lot on the higher rounds. Again, it's a wall weapon, so that's good. It means you can always go back and get ammo for it, but you're still going to be pretty hard pressed to get any kills with it. Moving on to the Spectre, you're getting damage of 90, headshot multiplier being 4 with 30 in the magazine and 120 in reserve. This gun's alright on lower rounds, it's not that special. When you pack punch it into the Phantom, the damage goes up to 130, the headshot multiplier going to 5, the mag capacity goes up to 45, and in reserve you're going to get 225. This gun's pretty weak, I wouldn't recommend it for high rounds, it just ain't that good. Moving on to the LMGs, you have the HK21, which does 150 damage, headshot multiplier of 3 with 125 in the magazine and then 500 in reserve. And when you pack a punch it, you're going to get 210 damage on that bad boy, a free headshot multiplier with 150 in the magazine and then 750 in reserve. So this thing's mobility is awful. Let's just get that right out the gate. But its actual potential to kill zombies in round 50 is very high because it has a lot of ammo, the damage is alright. And compared to practically everything on this list, bar the M1911, Mustang and Sally, it's actually going to get some kills on the higher rounds. The next LMG we have is the RPK with 130 damage, a free headshot multiplier, 100 in the magazine, and then 400 in reserve. Now, this gun's alright. When you pack punch it to the R115 resonator, damage will go up to 180, the headshot multiplier will be 3. With 125 being in the magazine, you will get some kills with this. It's not as good as the HK21, but it's still alright to have on the higher rounds. Moving on to the most powerful gun in this game, it'd be the Dragunov. So, the base version of it having 300 with a head multiplier of 10. That's right, you heard me right, 10 in the headshot multiplier, with 10 being in the magazine and then 40 in reserve. Unpack a punch, it isn't the strongest gun in the game. That would probably go to the L96, but it has 500 damage with a headshot multiplier of 10. But when you do pack a punch the Dragunov, the damage will be on par with the L9 pack a punch, with 1000 damage, again with a 10 headshot multiplier, with 10 in the magazine and then 80 in reserve. So this thing's easily going to kill on the higher rounds. Even though they do the same damage, I would say the Dragunov is better than the L9 because of one reason alone, the fact it's semi-automatic, compared to the L9, which is a bolt action. Speaking of the L9, the base damage does 500 damage with a headshot multiplier of 10, with 5 in the magazine and 45 in reserve. And when it's pack a punch, you're getting 1000 damage with a 10 headshot multiplier, with 8 in the magazine and then 72 in reserve. Now the biggest drawback to this weapon is the fact that it is a bolt action, but it's still somewhat feasible on the higher rounds because the damage is the same as Dragunov. You just have to be better at aiming. Moving on to the HS-10. This gun has damage of 160. It has 6 in the magazine and 36 in reserve. Now in the lower rounds, it's okay. It does alright. Again, when you pack a punch it, you're going to get them dual wield, so that's pretty cool. And the damage goes up to 300. In theory, you should get a few kills with this. You kind of have to spread it. It is an okay weapon and you will probably get a few kills with it, but I'd recommend some of the other weapons. Moving on to the Olympia, you have 80 damage with a multiplier of 8 with 2 in the magazine, and then you got 38 in reserve. It's a wall weapon, it's a starting weapon, but when you pack punch it, it actually turns out like an alright weapon. So when you pack punch the Olympia to the Hades, you'll have 200 damage for each pellet that hits a zombie. with 2 in the magazine and then 60 in reserve. This gun's actually alright stat-wise when you pack-a-punch it and such. I mean, long-term in practicality, it's not that great, but it is a wall weapon, so you can go get ammo for it. But genuinely not memeing, it's actually not that bad. Moving on to the Spaz 12, when Unpack-a-Punch, it has 160 damage per pellet that hits, it has 32 shots in the reserve, and then it has 6 in the magazine. When you do Pack-a-Punch it full, it turns into the Spaz 24, with 300 damage with every pellet that hits, totaling to 2400 damage, with 24 in the magazine and 72 in reserve. This gun is absolutely going to get kills. It's going to get a good few kills in round 50. It's actually quite a beast. The only thing it kind of lacks is a little bit of ammo, but then again it has more than the Olympia, so yeah. The thing with each of these shotguns is it looks like they all do the same damage. It's just how fast it can output that damage when they're pack-a-punched. Keeping that in mind, moving on to the stakeout with 160 damage for each pellet that hits, with 8 pellets able to hit a zombie, with 6 in the magazine and then 54 in reserve. It's kind of meh, but when you pack-a-punch it, it'll have 240 in terms of damage for each pellet, and it can have 10 pellets that hit a zombie. It's a pump action, so it's kind of slow, but it has 10 in the magazine and then 60 in reserve. It's actually not that bad in terms of stat. The damage is quite high on it, just like the other shotguns, which are all the same. It just kind of takes a while and is a bit slower compared to other guns. Moving on to quite possibly the worst gun in this game, the China Lake. The base version does 600 damage, with 2 in the magazine and then 20 in reserve. When you pack-punch it to the China Beach, you'll get 1000 damage per shot, with 5 in the magazine and 40 in reserve. You'll maybe barely get 1 kill with this thing. It's so bad. It's the worst gun in this game, hands down. It's worse than every other gun in this game. There's a reason to take everything else. The China Lake is just very, very meh. But what is really good is the M72 wall, with 2000 damage, with 1 shot in the magazine and 20 in reserve. When you pack-a-punch it, it goes to 3000 damage, which is absolutely insane first of all, with 10 in the magazine and 40 in reserve. Since this thing has splash damage, you're going to get a lot of kills with it. It's very, very powerful. Might not be the most practical, but in terms of damage, it is up there. It's quite high. Ballistic knife, we're not really going to cover this seriously because it won't do that much damage, but when meleeing with it, what you're getting in terms of damage is 500, or if you have the Bowie knife, you'll get 1000. You get 1 shot in the magazine and then 4 in reserve. Pack-a-punching it, the damage will go up to 1500, with 1 shot in the magazine and 9 in reserve. Moving on to the crossbow, base version, 400 damage, 1 shot in the magazine and 12 in the reserve. Pack-a-punching it, it goes up to 2500 damage, with 1 in the magazine and 12 in reserve once again. But the main reason you use this is because it acts like a monkey bomb. You don't use it for actually killing stuff. It's definitely more of like a protective weapon rather than anything else. Moving on to the World at War weapons that returned in the World at War maps, you got the Gavir 43 with 90 damage with a headshot multiplier 2.7, with magazine having 10 and in reserve 120. This gun's very basic, ain't gonna do much. When you pack-a-punch it, goes to 200, headshot multiplier goes to 6, magazine goes to 12 with 170 in reserve. I mean, I'm not going to recommend this gun around 50, but if you get all your headshots on a zombie, then yeah, you could kill it theoretically, but it's not going to be an easy or fun task, so I wouldn't say it's really viable for round 50 plus. Same like the M1 carbine as well, with the base version having 120 damage with a 2.7 headshot multiplier, 15 in the magazine, 120 in reserve. When you pack-punch it, you're going to get 200 damage with a 6 headshot multiplier, with 15 in the magazine and 150 in reserve. It's kind of the same thing where, you know, you could get, theoretically, kill a zombie, but what's the point when there's other better weapons out there? Then moving on to the GOAT, the STG-44. Now, this bad boy is going to have 100 damage with a 4 headshot multiplier, along with 30 shots in the magazine, and then 180 in reserve. When you pack-punch this bad boy, you'll get 150 damage with a 5 headshot multiplier, with 60 in the magazine, and then 300 in reserve. Now, not the worst gun, but again, you might get 1 or 2 kills with it, but it's not going to be that super effective on these high rounds. And comparing it to the other assault rifles where they just do a lot more damage, like, why would you use this, you know? Then moving on to the absolute baddest of boys, we have the Thompson with 120 max damage with a 4 headshot multiplier. This gun's going to have 20 in the magazine and 200 in reserve, and when you pack-punch it, damage is going to go all the way up to 200 with 5 headshot multiplier, with 40 in the magazine and 250 in reserve. Now this gun is not that great, but it's good for ammo, first of all, good for insta-kill rounds, and it is in the perfect spot for the high round strat on Doris. So even though its killing potential might not be that great, it's going to be useful on the higher rounds. Now moving on to the stat-wise strongest SMG in this game, we have the Type 100. With the gun doing 100 damage with a 4 headshot multiplier, 30 in the magazine and 160 in reserve, the ammo's okay, but unpack punch the damage isn't that great. When you do pack punch it full, it's similar to the Thompson with the 200 damage, with a 5.5 headshot multiplier, so I think in terms of SMGs, this gun has the highest headshot multiplier in the game, which outranks it slightly to all the other SMGs. With 60 in the magazine and 220 in reserve, this gun's also a wall weapon, so theoretically, yes, it's going to get you some kills, and it's a wall weapon, and that's pretty good. Moving on to the FG42, this gun has 100 damage, with a 2.7 headshot multiplier, with 32 in the magazine, and 192 in reserve. When you pack punch it, you're going to get 110 damage, with a headshot multiplier of 3 with 64 in the magazine and then 400 in the reserve. But since the damage is already so low in this thing, it's not going to get you that many kills. Moving on to the most overpowered gun in this game, we have the Kar 98K with 100 damage with a 3.5 headshot multiplier. With 5 in the magazine and 50 in reserve, when you pack punch it to the Armageddon, you're going to get 200 damage with a 10 headshot multiplier, which isn't bad. It's, it's a good multiplier. With 8 in the magazine and 60 in reserve, but this thing still isn't that strong. I mean, comparing it to the other sniper rifles, with the headshot multiplier, you're getting the same damage as the other guns pack-a-punch, like the L115, or you have, obviously, the Dragunov as well, which they'll just do more damage in the long term. Sure, this thing is a wall weapon, so it has that going for it, but, I mean, hey, each their own, I guess. We then have the double barrel shotgun, where it has 200 damage for every pellet that hits a zombie, with 2 in the magazine and 60 in reserve. Where you pack a punch it, that damage goes up to 380 with a 10 pellets in the actual shot, so if you shoot a zombie with all the pellets, it's going to do a pretty decent amount of damage actually. This thing's just like a better version of the Olympia, so yeah, it is a pretty good gun compared to it. And then you have our boy, the trench gun, which does 160 damage for every pellet that hits, and then you have 6 in the magazine and 60 in reserve. When you pack a punch into the gut shot, you're going to get 240 in the damage department for every pellet that hits, and there's 10 that can hit. With 10 in the magazine and 60 in reserve, this gun is really good all around just for killing in general, and it's really effective against dogs as well. Now that we've been through every gun in the game, talking about its damage, how effective they kind of are, I'm going to name off some of the actual guns that are viable in the high rounds that will get you more than a few kills. The M1911 is one of them where it will actually get you a pretty decent amount of kills, into the 10s if you're lucky. The Galil is another weapon where it's not mental compared to damage of the other assault rifles, but the ammo in it for some reasons. The Dragunov is another weapon that is severely underrated, with that headshot multiplier of 10 and already doing base 1000 damage when it's pack-a-punch. It's going to be able to kill a good few zombies on the higher rounds. If you're really good at aiming, because that's what all kind of comes down to at the end anyway, is your accuracy with these headshots. You could get an insane amount of kills with it. And when going over these weapons as well, I know I say that, like, you won't get a kill with this. Theoretically, every gun in this game, you pretty much could if you hit all your headshots on one zombie. But it's just a very hard task to do. Now, the Spaz 12 is more maybe my, like, guilty pleasure for gun, but I feel like on high rounds, it's the shotgun that you can notice it actually killing the fastest. It does have the fastest fire rate out of them, but the ammo doesn't keep up with the weapon, so you'll get a good few kills on the higher rounds with it, but this is more just, like, my personal, like, yeah, I like this gun, it's cool. It's cool. And one of my personal favorites, which I didn't really think was going to be that good, is the M72 Law, where it does that 3000 damage per shot, and there's a good 50 shots in this. Playing on a map with PhD, this thing's an absolute monster and will kill a decent chunk of zombies. And not that it's practical at killing, but the crossbow is also a really good weapon just because it gets, like, the zombies away from you, obviously. But the strongest gun in this game that isn't classed as a wonder weapon is the Dragunov. And ultimately, if you're going through the box trying to get a gun that's actually going to kill in the higher rounds, this is going to be the gun that's going to do it. The L9 does the same damage, it's just a lot slower, and the Dragunov has more damage as well. But anyway, that's every Black Ops 1 gun and, like, their chances of actually killing. Again, theoretically, most guns in this game could get 1 or 2 kills if you got every headshot on a zombie, but that's very inaccurate considering the high rounds are just a bit mental and the hordes spread out. So for a lot of these guns, theoretically, yeah, you could, but it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be viable whatsoever. The guns that are actually going to kill zombies and you're going to notice it are the ones I kind of listed off just back there. If this video hits 200 likes, then I'll do this video for Black Ops 2. And also check out this video here. You might enjoy it where I go over all the wonder weapons from World at War to Black Ops 3. Much love guys, Big Chungus Wholesome 100, and I'll see yous in the next one.